And there's a lot of sports going on. NBA playoffs in full effect right now. For those of you that are keeping track of the podcast and supporting, I appreciate all of you. My apologies these past 2 weeks. I know the podcast have been getting posted a little bit later than what I anticipated, but do not worry. Everything is back on track now. It's just been the last 3 weeks have been pretty busy, so we'll be back on track to get these uploaded on Wednesday. So for most of you, depending on what podcast platform you use, you'll get it on Thursday instead of Thursday or Friday. So anyways, before we get into it, I again want to thank you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube, the Chuck It Up podcast. Make sure you search that. We're putting out our clips on there as well. And then also on your favorite podcast platform, make sure you subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, whatever you use. Get on the Chuck It Up podcast and make sure you hit that subscribe button because we got some fire content for you. But anyways, let's get into this because I always say we got an action-packed show, but I mean, it really is action-packed. So we got to make sure that we get it cracking. Let's just go ahead and jump in. So kickoff, we going straight to the NCAA. I'm going to say basketball for a little bit later, but NCAA because this is big news for me, especially because I'm a big NCAA guy. Football, I'm all about the NCAA football. I work with a lot of these guys, and it's exciting. I think it's not the purest form of football. I would think that is high school at this moment, but slowly but surely high school is starting to become professional. So now it's starting to become Pop Warner is going to be the purest form of football. But anyways, that's besides the point. As I stated last week, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have suspended their seasons, their fall sports, and they have pushed them to spring. Well, the Big Ten has more news on that because there has been an uproar, obviously, by Big Ten players, Pac-12 players, as well as the fan bases. But the Big Ten specifically said that they will not be looking it over or overturning their decision to suspend the fall sports season. So according to David Cobb of CBS Sports, amid going questions surrounding the Big Ten's decision to postpone its fall season, League Commissioner Kevin Warren wrote in an open letter on Wednesday that the vote of the Big Ten Council of Presidents and Chancellors was overwhelmingly in support of postponing fall sports and will not be revisited. So that is unfortunate because the Big Ten, obviously Ohio State is one of the teams that we anticipated to be in the football playoffs. They will not have that ability to represent their conference or even represent their school in the Pac-12 or in the college playoffs if it were to go on, which is unfortunate because everyone expects Ohio State to be one of the top 4 teams, if not the number 1 team in the nation. Like myself, I think Ohio State is the number 1 team in the nation right now, and it's pretty close, but I don't think that they would fall out of that. So the fact that the Big Ten has suspended fall sports, it's unfortunate because we won't be able to see Ohio State. But that's also assuming that the other conferences do play. So the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12, they are still on the road to playing in the fall. We will see how that goes. There are still some indicators that are pointing towards that not happening. But again, we're going to be positive and hope that happens because football in the spring, college football in the spring just doesn't gel, right? It just doesn't gel. So that's the update from the Big Ten. They will not be revisiting it. So that is the final decision. I wonder how that's going to affect the student athletes there. I wonder if they're going to have an opportunity to transfer if the other conferences go. I know we talked about this in the last podcast, but are they going to allow these student athletes from the Big Ten, the Pac-12, to transfer to the SEC, ACC, Big 12 to play in the fall? We don't know that. There hasn't been much discussion on that, but there has been discussion on eligibility, and I'll actually get to that a little bit later in the podcast. But anyways, one of the most One of the biggest players in the Big Ten has also been one of the most vocal in the conference, and he might be the best player in the conference for the Big Ten. And I'm talking about Justin Fields, the quarterback for Ohio State. He was very vocal on his stance on wanting to play in the fall. He started a petition, the hashtag We Want to Play petition. I don't know how many signatures they were able to get on the petition, but obviously that didn't work because the Big Ten came out and said that, it's been voted on and we're not revisiting it. Obviously, the petition was set up prior to that decision being made and the votes being made. But Justin Fields was very vocal. On the petition, it stated that we, the football players of the Big Ten, together with the fans and supporters of college football, requested the Big Ten Conference immediately reinstate the 2020 football season. Allow the Big Ten players and teams to make their own choice as to whether they wish to play or opt out this fall season. Allow Big Ten players and teams who choose to opt out of playing in the fall to do so without penalty or repercussion, the petition read. So Justin Fields is, again, when you have someone of that caliber, someone of that ilk, someone who, in the consensus is going to be a top 2 pick in this upcoming year's draft, the NFL draft, that's big time for him to step up there and kind of talk for the other players. It's one thing if it's, a guy that doesn't get much playing time, but we're talking about in some people's eyes, the Heisman favorite for this year. I'm not going to say that for me. I'm a big fan of Justin Fields. I thought he was going to win the Heisman last year. But this year, I didn't have him as my favorite. And I'll actually hold it. I think I talked about in a previous podcast, Spencer Rattler for Oklahoma is my favorite to win the Heisman just because of that offense, the way it's set up, the receivers he has. But it's not about Oklahoma. So let me go back to Justin Fields. He, when you have a guy that is this valuable to college football, speaking up for the rest of the team, the rest of the conference, and just football fans in general and all the other players and just playing, that's big time, especially to start a petition. Unfortunately, in this case, it did not help the cause. But at least he was able to be vocal and take a stance and, fight for the other players who really need it. Because Justin Fields is going to be a top 2 pick regardless of what happens this year or what happened this year, barring injury. But luckily for him, he won't have to play. So there's really nothing that he has to be worried about other than a freak accident that hopefully does not happen. So he had nothing to lose. Justin Fields is going to be, again, in my eyes, I think he should be the number 1 quarterback taken in this upcoming draft. His arm talent, accuracy, ability to run. It's almost what type of flavor do you like? Again, Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, both of them mobile, arm strength, accuracy are all there. So it just all depends on what you're looking for. Trevor Lawrence, measurable wise, is better, but I still think Justin Fields, when it comes to his athletic ability as well as his accuracy throwing the ball, I think he was just a little bit more accurate than Trevor Lawrence. And that's nothing to take away from Trevor Lawrence because both these guys, whoever gets picked number 1, no one's going to question it. So big ups to Justin Fields for putting his neck on the line. And matter of fact, he should be part of the King of the Game segment. So I will jump that up. And I have another King of the Game. This one's going to be funny. But honorary King of the Game, Justin Fields for sticking his neck out there for the rest of college football. So the NCAA also approved a 12-hour rule. So this 12-hour rule basically states that per week there only could be 12 hours of physical activity for the student athletes at the schools that are not going to participate in the fall. So according to Dan Rule of 11 Warriors, and that is the website that covers Ohio State. So it says, in his article, it says, as part of a practice model approved Wednesday by the NCAA Division I Council, football teams that don't play in the fall and plan to play in the spring will be allowed to conduct up to 5 hours per week of non-contact on-field drills, while the rest of the 12 hours can be used for strength and conditioning workouts, meetings, and film review. Athletes will be required to have 2 days off per week, and no more than 4 hours of team activities can be held in one day. So actually, I was a little bit wrong. So it's 12 hours of strength and conditioning. I apologize. And 5 hours for team activities, non-contact on-field drills. So the NCAA is starting to come up with some rulings when it comes to COVID. This is some of the coaches and some of the programs are not happy about this rule because they still want to get ready for the spring if they do end up playing on the spring. Not to mention that if other conferences do end up playing, then there's going to be, they're going to have a lot of activity. They're going to have the advantage when it comes to activity for their program. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. We'll see how this 12-hour rule plays out for the Big 12 and the Pac-12 specifically. As of this moment, we don't know, again, where the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 stand. Currently, they're standing on, we're going to play in the fall, but that could easily change because, I'm glad that I brought that up. It's a perfect segue into this. So the NCAA's top doctor says if testing stays as it is, there is no way we could go forward with sports. And in this article, I don't have the specific article, company or whoever wrote the article with me, but in this article they state, testing is still, they're not able to keep up this type of testing. Now, the FDA has approved new type of testing where it's a saliva based, so they don't have to go up your nose. And this saliva based test is cheaper, it's quicker as far as results, and everything is better than the nose swab, which sounds good, right? But the problem is they have not been able to mass produce these things, and with the quantity that's going to be needed to test these players for college football, they're going to need a lot. And then it comes into question now, if we do mass produce these, who's going to get them first? The people or the student athletes or the students that are returning to school, which is another main concern of the NCAA's top doctor, is that they're not really concerned with the student athletes passing the COVID to each other. They're very concerned with other students that are going to be returning to campus, living in the same places as these student athletes, interacting with these student athletes in some form or fashion, whether it's walking by them, because, even if they're living on campus, we can't anticipate that everyone's going to stay in the room, all together. So there is some concerns, mainly for the doctor. It is testing and the students coming back to campus if they decide to. So we'll see. Again, this is not good news for the college football season, and it is going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. I'm hoping for college football, if we could get 3 Power 5 conferences to play football in the fall, and then have the Big 10 and the Pac-12 play it in the spring, that would be cool, because the spring is low-key dead. Especially with the NBA kind of wrapping up their season right now. There's not going to be anything in the spring unless The Rock is able to somehow come up with a miracle and have the XFL ready to play in the spring. I don't anticipate that happening either. So we'll see what happens, man. I'm positive. I'm trying to remain positive about the college football season. No one's a bigger college football fan than me. I love college football, and let's hope that the at least the power, 3 of the 5 of the power 5 are able to play in the fall. So that's that. Thanks for stopping by. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button for more fire sports takes. And for those of you who are on the go, make sure you subscribe to our full show, which airs every Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and a bunch more. Until then, I'm chucking it up, and I'll see you guys next time.